Good afternoon, and welcome to syracuse.com's 24th Congressional District debate. Joining us today are two candidates seeking the Central New York seat in the November election, Republican John Katko and Democrat Dana Balter. The election is November 3rd, and early voting in New York starts this Saturday, October 24th. I'm Chris Baker, a political reporter and editor here at syracuse.com, and I'll be today's moderator. We'll have up to an hour this afternoon to hear from both candidates on a wide variety of topics. We'll pose pointed questions to each candidate and give them 60 seconds to respond, followed by open debate and rebuttals as needed. I will interject with follow-up questions where I see fit and do my best to ensure that each candidate gets equal time. Neither candidate has seen any of the questions in advance. We'll skip opening statements today since most voters are by now familiar with each candidate, and we'll dive right into the questions. We flipped a coin to see who gets the first question, and it goes to Dana. Dana, we're going to open today's debate on the topic of President Donald Trump, whose polarizing presence has loomed large in this race and in many races around the nation. Dana, you got your political start with a group formed to actively resist and oppose President Trump and his policies. This district has traditionally been a purple one that alternates between Republican and Democratic control. Your commercials say you will work with Joe Biden if elected. If President Trump wins, however, will you also work with him and your Republican colleagues in Congress? If so, where? And if not, why?
Thank you, Chris. Thanks for having me, and thanks to all of you for watching at home today. I will work with anybody in Congress who has the best interests of Central and Western New Yorkers at heart. When I get to Washington, D.C., I will start every day asking myself one question: what do Central and Western New Yorkers need? The yardstick by which I will measure every policy is what is going to make life better for people here. And I think that there are places that we can work with Donald Trump. Infrastructure is something he's been talking about for years he wants to do. I know that there are places we can work, Democrats and Republicans hand in hand. One of the things that I support is actually a conservative policy to come out of conservative think tanks. It's a carbon fee and dividend, which is one of the best things that we can do to address climate change. It's a market-based solution, and it will give every household in America a little boost in their income while making polluters pay for the pollution that they cause. It's a perfect example of how we can work together.
Thank you. John, you refused to endorse the president when he first ran 4 years ago, calling him unfit for the job. In January, however, you said you're endorsing him for a second term. That was before a pandemic swept the nation, infecting millions, including the president himself, who has downplayed the virus and mocked his rivals for wearing masks. Do you still plan to vote for Donald Trump in November? And if so, what about his first term makes you think he deserves a second?
Well, yes, I do intend to vote for him again, as I've said since January, and I'll tell you why. It's not so much about him versus Biden. It's about where we're going as a country. Are we going to go to more taxes? Are we going to go to nationalized health care? Are we going to go to more big government and a choking economy? That is exactly what we don't need coming out of a pandemic. For 6 years in Congress, I've been one of the most bipartisan members in all of Congress. In fact, now, I'm very proud of this, I'm ranked the number 2 most bipartisan in all of Congress, more than any other Democrat and all but one Republican. And that means I will be a check on the president no matter who's in office, and I'll be a supporter of the president no matter who's in office. I did the same thing with President Obama. I would do the same thing with President Biden. But the reason I'm supporting the president is not so much for him, it's because of the policies. I don't think we can go back to a time of more taxes. My opponent and Biden have already said they're going to raise taxes. I don't think we can go to a nationalized health care. It would bankrupt us and then Medicare as we know it for seniors who paid in it their whole lives. So it's not so much about him, and it's probably pretty much in spite of him. His personality, his rhetoric are harmful, and I will always stand up to that no matter what.
If I could follow on that, I think 4 years ago it was the Access Hollywood tape that you cited as a reason for not endorsing him. Is there anything he could do between now and Election Day that would lose your support?
Well, that's speculation, but I can tell you this much. Let's look at what we did do in the last 4 years. We had one of the largest tax cuts in recent memory, and that led to the lowest unemployment in our country for African Americans, Hispanics, and women. In fact, the last 2 years leading up to the pandemic, 74% of jobs are being filled by women. He said he was going to redo the NAFTA trade deal. He did it. He said he was going to go after China and get a new trade deal with them. He's done it. He said he was going to have a different foreign policy, less pacifistic and more strength. ISIS is now gone as a caliphate. So there's a lot of things he did. The problem is his rhetoric gets in the way, and I've called him on that time again, and I will continue to call him out on it.
Okay.
And going forward, that's what I'll do.
Thank you.
Chris,
Dana,
I'd like
chance
to respond to that, please. So it's more than just the president's rhetoric, and for Congressman Katko to belittle the real danger that Donald Trump poses to this country and to many groups of people within it is a shame. It's not just that he's undisciplined and that he doesn't know how to use Twitter. He has made us less safe with every passing week. He has refused to get this pandemic under control and regularly flouts public health guidelines. As a result, 220,000 Americans are dead, 8 million are infected, 30 million have lost jobs, more than 12 million are still out of work, and our kids are experiencing a second year of disrupted education. He has made us less safe on the world stage by distancing us from our allies and embracing our adversaries and dictators. He has rolled back environmental protections, worsening the climate crisis that literally has our country on fire. This is the man that John Katko endorses. That is a problem. Donald Trump is taking this country in the wrong direction. He is making us less safe. And we need representatives in Congress who understand that and who will fight for what's best for us.
Thank you. We're going to move on to
If
some
I may
of
respond
these
briefly.
topics. 15 seconds.
Sure, I'm not belittling anybody. The fact of the matter is the choice is pretty stark. Warts and all, would you rather have higher taxes and government-run health care and much more government, or would you rather have what we did before the pandemic? And would you rather have someone who's a very bipartisan member like myself, or someone who's more of a partisan individual with far left policies like my opponent? That's really your choice.
Again, have to respond here because Congressman Katko has just repeated a lie for the second time already in this debate. Joe Biden and I are not talking about raising taxes. We're talking about cutting taxes by offering working families expanded child tax credits, by offering tax credits for first-time home buyers, by offering tax credits to help with the cost of child care and elder care.
Thank you. And these are all topics we're going to dive into as we go forward here, which is a good segue into our next topic, which is health care. John, this question will go to you.
Sure.
You voted against repealing the Affordable Care Act because you said you wanted to make sure there was a viable replacement. What would you like to see installed to replace the ACA, and why hasn't the Republican Party been able to come up with an alternative?
Well, we have begun to come up with an alternative. The first thing we did was called the 21st Century Cures Act. If you want to really get a handle on healthcare costs, you've got to find cures for one of the biggest drivers in healthcare. My dad passed away from Alzheimer's last year, and that is going to be the biggest driver going forward. 21st Century Cures poured tens of billions of dollars into finding cures for chronic diseases like Alzheimer's and cancer, that if we are successful, which we're already starting to see successes from it, could have a dramatic impact. I also advocate for interstate competition for healthcare, which we've started, medical malpractice reform, which Democrats roundly stop, prescription drug price reform, and taking people that are the highest cost drivers for insurance, like the 10% of people who generate 90% of the cost, and use the funding mechanisms from the Affordable Care Act to fund a high-risk pool to put them in, and let others go on open markets. And you juxtapose that what my opponent wants to do, and she wants to have Medicare for all. And it's not just Joe Biden's plan. Joe Biden rejects one of her central things, and that is to put every child on Medicare starting out in their lives.
Thank you. Dana, I would like to ask you about that. You're an advocate of a partial adoption of Medicare for all, and John has said that you want to raise taxes in order to pay for such a program. How exactly would you pay for your Medicare program, and would it include a tax increase?
So there's a couple pieces here that we need to talk about. First of all, it's important to understand that what I'm talking about is giving everybody access to Medicare, starting with the steps that Joe Biden has outlined, lowering the age of eligibility for Medicare, and offering a public buy-in so that people of any age who want to participate can. I also support enrolling babies when they're born, so from day one of life, you're guaranteed care. What we have to understand about healthcare is that we pay for it through taxes, premiums, deductibles, and co-pays. And under the plan I am outlining, 95% of households will pay less for healthcare. Only the top 5% will pay more, which I'm okay with. The reason Congressman Katko isn't okay with that is that he works for the insurance companies and the pharmaceutical companies, from whom he's taken hundreds of thousands of dollars in corporate PAC money. That's why he's continually voted to gut our health care and keep prescription drug prices high. In fact, this year he voted against a bipartisan bill to lower the cost of prescription drug prices. And his reason for doing that, he said, was because it would stifle innovation. Another lie, because in fact that bill specifically invests the money that we save from lowering prescription drug prices into research and development.
John, I'd like to give you a chance to respond to that.
Sure. It's already been stated that, it's already been acknowledged here that I fought to stave the Affordable Care Act. The only person in this debate who's looking to get rid of it is my opponent. And she just acknowledged that it's Medicare for all from people from the moment they're on. And she just acknowledged by not answering it that she's going to have to raise taxes. Fortunately, we don't have to listen to what she said today. She was caught before saying you'd have to have a tax to raise your health care costs. That's a fact, and that's what she's going to do. I'm fighting for real market reforms, and I fought against gutting the Affordable Care Act. I stood up to my party, and I stood up to my president in that regard. And that was a tough thing to do, but I did it because it's the right thing to do. Taxing is not.
This is unbelievable. This is one of the most remarkable things I have ever heard in a debate. Congressman Katko is trying to make you believe that between the two of us, he's the person who stands with the ACA. I have been consistent from the beginning of my last campaign in saying that we need to protect and defend and strengthen the ACA while we work towards a system where everyone has access to Medicare. The congressman has voted to gut the ACA. That bill Donald Trump is running around the country bragging about that's killing the ACA, the congressman helped pass that bill. And what he is saying now he supports in an effort to suddenly fix the healthcare problem he's done nothing about for 6 years, these high-risk pools, clearly show he doesn't understand insurance, because that's exactly why we needed the ACA in the first place. If we go back to that system, the people who need health coverage the most will be left out in the cold.
Dana,
300,000 people in our district with pre-existing conditions.
I would like to get an answer to the question, though. You said healthcare costs on the whole would go down, but would taxes have to be raised in order to pay for that plan?
It's not about just taxes. It's about how you pay for health care. Right now in this country, if we keep the system that we have, we will spend $34 trillion on health care over the next 10 years. The study that the congressman is so fond of citing has shown us that if we move to the system I'm talking about, we will save $2 trillion on health care costs overall for the country. And as I said, 95% of households will save out of pocket on health care.
So I'll be brief. Are you buying the fact that she's going to raise your taxes but save you money? When's the last time the government saved you money? She's telling you she's going to raise your taxes and you say, but don't worry about it. On the back end, you're going to save money. That doesn't happen, and you know it.
All right, let's move on to our next topic. We're going to talk about COVID-19 and the current pandemic, which has reshaped many of our lives over the last 7 months. In hindsight, there are a lot of things the government could have done differently to deal with COVID-19, but experts believe we're not close to the end of this pandemic, and a vaccine won't be widely available for another year or so. What do you think needs to be done going forward to better protect, engage, and inform Americans about COVID-19? And Dana, we'll start with you.
This is incredibly important. Obviously, this is the biggest challenge we face as a country. It's the biggest challenge we've faced in a century. It's pretty simple what we need to do. We have to get the virus under control, and that requires a national testing and tracing program. It requires people to wear masks, and it requires safe and effective vaccines and treatments that are distributed equitably to the people who need them the most. Donald Trump has been the biggest obstacle to getting this done. He has consistently refused to stand up that testing and tracing program. He regularly flouts public health recommendations from the experts, discouraging people from wearing masks, making fun of those who do. It's because of his mishandling of this pandemic that we are in the situation we are in now, where our kids are experiencing a second year of disrupted school. Millions of people are still out of work. We need to get the virus under control, and then we need relief. And that means extending unemployment insurance, hazard pay for frontline workers, direct aid for state and local governments so that they can continue providing critical services. These are all things that Congressman Katko has voted against repeatedly.
That's just not true. In fact, myself and Congressman Brindisi and many others in what's called the Problem Solvers Caucus, 25 Democrats and 25 Republicans who meet every single week, at least once a week, crafted a bill for COVID relief measures, which contains all of the things she's talking about. $500 billion for state and local funding, an enormous amount of money for testing and tracing, money for schools, another round of $1,200 stimulus payments, and another round of unemployment insurance, many, many other great things. It was the only truly bipartisan bill that came out of Congress since the COVID relief package in March. And within an hour of that thing being announced in front of the Capitol steps, when all of us were together, Democrats and Republicans, my opponent came out and slammed it because it wasn't what she wanted, the HEROES Act. Well, the HEROES Act sounds great, but it had no bipartisan support. And in fact, 27 Democrats asked Pelosi to stop messaging bills, and one of those was Anthony Brindisi. So Anthony Brindisi voted against the very thing she's pointing to, and he supported and helped write with me and the others the very thing I'm pointing to, the only bipartisan bill that's going to work, and that's a Problem Solvers Caucus bill. And I guarantee right after the election that'll get passed, no doubt.
The proposal that the congressman's talking about isn't going anywhere, and he knew it when he proposed it. It is not adequate funding for any of the things that we talked about. It's less than half of what we need for our state and local governments. It's less than half of what we need to support people who are trying to get through this pandemic. And what was in the HEROES Act was a comprehensive package of the relief that we need. The congressman voted against it. He voted against the renegotiated version of the HEROES Act as well, and likes to dismiss it as a messaging bill. But you can't claim to be bipartisan and dismiss everything that you disagree with as a messaging bill. Peter King, a Republican from New York, voted for that bill because he recognized how important it was to bring that aid home to our state.
If I may respond briefly. Yeah, let me reiterate. 27 moderate Democrats, of which my opponent never would be, voted, send a letter to Pelosi saying, please stop sending messaging bills that have no chance of passing. One of those was my colleague and friend Anthony Brindisi, both of us whom vote 70% of the time together on bipartisan measures. He voted against it, and he voted against it because he knew that the Problem Solvers Caucus bill is a real bill. And for her to belittle saying $500 billion to state and local governments is not enough, I can tell you one thing, Ben Walsh and Ryan McMahon would be doing backflips if they got that. And I'm going to keep fighting for that, and we'll get it done after this election. That's for darn sure.
Ben Walsh is one of the people who criticized your vote against the HEROES Act because that would have brought $360 million to the city of Syracuse, which we desperately need. And as a result, our city is now experiencing budget cuts, layoffs, cuts to services. You can't hide behind them when it's convenient, but vote against the interests of Central and Western New Yorkers. The voters see through it.
Hey, man, he supported the bill. That's all I can say.
All right, let's move on. Actually, before we do, just a quick yes or no question that I'd like to pose to each of you on this. Do you believe that there should be a national mask mandate? John, we'll start with you.
I think it should be up to the states.
Dana?
Yes.
Thank you. Changing gears again, we'd like to talk about race. Protests across the country this summer have forced a new national conversation about race and oppression in America, both historically and today. Tell us one thing you've learned from those conversations. John, we'll start with you.
Sure, that racism still is an issue in this country. There's no question about it. And so I did something about it. I didn't just sit there and wring my hands about it. I got together with members from the Problem Solvers Caucus that are involved in law enforcement in the past, like Pete Stauver of Minnesota. And we worked with the Congressional Black Caucus, including Karen Bass and Hakeem Jeffries. Karen was one of the finalists to be Vice President Biden, to be his vice president. And Karen and I are good friends. Karen and I, in Problem Solvers Caucus, crafted a bill that I'm pretty confident after the election is going to pass that addresses race relations in the United States with respect to law enforcement and takes care of some of the systemic problems that we have with law enforcement. Vast majority of law enforcement officers are awesome. I know them, I've worked with them for 20 years, but there are some bad apples, and I know that because I prosecuted corrupt cops, and I was proud to do so and happy to do so, however troubling it may be. But we put down the swords, even in this vitriolic time, and got together and crafted something that I think you're all going to be very proud of right after the election, and I'm very proud to be part of that.
Thank you. Dana?
It's remarkable. I hope you heard how that answer started. What the congressman has learned from the events of this summer is that racism is still a problem in this country. Remarkable that he didn't know that before this summer.
That's not what I said. That's not what I said.
That is what you said, actually. And what we need to make the commitment to do as elected representatives and as a government is to take seriously the problem of systemic racism and address it, recognize that it permeates every area of policy and every level of government. We have to tackle systemic racism in the criminal legal system, sure, also in education and in housing and in healthcare. The fact of the matter is the legacy of racism that our country has carried forward affects outcomes and policies in all of these areas. And if we're serious about tackling the problem of racial justice, which we should be, we are long overdue in resolving this issue, we've got to tackle it at every level. I am proud to be endorsed by the Congressional Black Caucus, and I cannot wait to get to Congress to implement real, meaningful reforms across all these areas of policy to help address the problems of systemic racism in this country.
John, 30 seconds to respond to that.
Sure. Like I said, we've crafted a real bill that's going to work. We've worked with Tim Scott and others in the Senate, and it's going to work, the Problem Solvers Caucus bill. But also, don't forget, we have to unwind some of the things that Joe Biden himself caused in 1994 with the crime bill. I am intimately familiar with that crime bill because it was the introduction of mandatory minimums to our society for low-level drug offenses. And I had no choice but to prosecute those because I was sworn to uphold the law. And that's why I always try to get people to cooperate and get out from underneath those mandatory minimums. And the First Step Act we passed last year helped unwind some of those tough laws. And let's face it, without that, we wouldn't have some of the progress we're making now. So I worked hard on the First Step Act, and I worked hard on the police reform bill, and I'm going to keep working on things for the betterment of our society, because that's what I want to do in Congress.
Dana, final word, 30 seconds, if you'd like it.
Well, I would just say that the congressman should know better than anybody from his career in the criminal legal system what needs to be changed. He's been in Congress now for 6 years, has not led on these issues, has never really talked about them before this summer when the George Floyd demonstrations forced him to. And the First Step Act that he's talking about is the first reform bill that Congress has seen in a long time. His name isn't even on it. He wasn't a co-sponsor. So again, this is another example of Congressman Katko talking a good game, but when we need him, he's just not there.
All right.
Now, I must respond to that because that has racial overtones.
15 seconds.
I helped write it, and I helped work with all the prosecutors that are now members of Congress and providing input over several years to that bill, and I voted for it. What else more do you want me to do? And for her to pull at straws like that is really kind of desperate on her part.
All right, let's move on from this topic. We're going to take we'll call it a halftime break here for 10-question lightning round. I think you've both been through this before. We're going to do 10 questions with short 1 or 2 word answers. We'll rapid fire them. I'm going to start with Dana. Question number 1, what's the last book you read?
Becoming by Michelle Obama.
John?
Tip and the Gipper. I've read it many times.
All right. What's your favorite breed of dog? John?
Yellow Lab, man. I have one right now.
Dana?
I have to say Maltese. That's my puppies.
Should the Syracuse-Columbus statue remain where it is or be removed? Dana?
I support the mayor's plan to move it to a different location and keep the circle as a commemorative space honoring contributions of Italian Americans to our history.
John?
They should add a statue of Hiawatha, the same size and stature as Columbus, and rename the circle Heritage Circle so we can learn from our past instead of trying to erase it.
All right. A little more than one answer or one word, but we'll keep going. First for you, John, name one member of an opposing party who you voted for in your lifetime.
Bill Clinton.
Dana?
Jim Walsh.
What's the best show or movie you watched during the COVID lockdown? Dana?
I watched a show called Unbelievable about prosecuting sexual assaulters.
John?
Anything that was a comedy, any comedy I watched because there was so much sadness going on.
What kind of candy do you give out on Halloween? John?
Kit Kat, of course.
Dana?
I like a mixed bag of chocolate.
Do you think there should be term limits for members of Congress? Dana?
No, I think if your member is doing a good job, you should be able to hire them as many times as you want.
John?
You absolutely need term limits. There's too many people that have been there way too long. You'll never see me there more than 12 years tops. That I promise.
Do you prefer the old roof of the Carrier Dome or the new one? John?
I've been inside. The new one's awesome.
Dana?
I like the new one.
And last one, what's the best spot for breakfast in central New York? Dana?
I gotta go with the banana walnut pancakes at Mother's Cupboard.
John?
Finally ours. Awesome place.
All right. Thanks for indulging. We will actually. You know what? Before we do move on to a couple more questions, I just want to take 30 seconds and give each of you a chance to to return to any topic on the debate that you feel you ran out of time on or wanted to add to. Dana, we'll start with you. Anything you'd like to add from the first half of the debate there?
Anything I'd like to add? Well, I think that we need to talk more about healthcare because this is the most important issue that Central and Western New Yorkers are facing. Congressman Katko has repeatedly worked to undermine our access to healthcare. Right now, the Supreme Court is going to hear a case to overturn the ACA the week after Election Day. It was Congressman Katko's vote on the tax bill that set up that court case and made it possible. This is one of the many areas where he is working for his corporate donors and not for us. And it's putting us in jeopardy, especially in a time of a global pandemic.
My opponent is desperately trying to do everything she can to deflect from health care. She couldn't even bring herself to acknowledge to you that she's going to raise your taxes. That's a fact and something you should be very concerned about. She's playing hide to football here, man, and you know she's going to raise your taxes and instead of trying to find market-based reforms. And you know from the statements that Chris made and from the statements that I made, I voted against the Affordable Care Act repeals when my whole party was for it. And I paid a heavy price for that, but I kept my word to my constituents, and I'll continue to do that. So you can keep trying to revise history, but the bottom line is you're taxing, and you're spending, and you're trying to tell us we're going to save money. It ain't going to happen.
It's not a revision of history.
Is there any other topic that you would like to return to? That was a response to Dana's point. Is there any other topic?
All good here, thanks.
All right. Let's move on to taxes then. John, we'll start this question with you. Multiple nonpartisan analyses have said in the last several years that the 2017 GOP tax cuts will not pay for themselves as promised. Despite a growing economy in 2018 and 2019, tax revenue has declined, growing the federal deficit to more than $3 trillion. Knowing that, John, did the tax breaks fail to live up to the promises of 2017?
No, they didn't, because first and foremost, the tax reform led to some of the greatest job growth in the history of our country. And I'll repeat, African Americans, Hispanics, and women had the lowest unemployment rates in the history of our country. We had some of the historically low unemployment rates in Central New York. Businesses thrived, and businesses came home from overseas. And we proved Obama's maxim wrong, that those businesses are gone and they're not coming back. That, coupled with the trade reworkings we did, administrative regulations we did, we reworked, have worked. And my opponent and Vice President Biden have said they are going to get rid of that tax reform. That is a tax hike. And the greatest percentage of tax cuts in that tax reform was the $20,000 to $50,000 range, where the average tax cut was between 10 and 13%. I do not want to raise taxes. I don't think it works. We need to continue to grow this economy. If you raise these taxes, the economy is going to get much worse, especially coming out of a pandemic, and the deficit will get worse. We need to grow this economy and keep pushing forward.
Dana, would you vote to undo those tax cuts?
We're going to vote to repeal the tax cuts on the wealthiest Americans and on corporations. As Joe Biden has made very clear, we're not going to raise taxes on anybody making less than $400,000 a year. The congressman glosses over what the real effects of that tax bill were. They haven't lived up to their promises. They did not cut taxes as much as they said they would for everyday folks. They did not bring jobs and better wages. In fact, the tax bill offshored jobs. It gave more than 80% of the benefits to the top 1% and corporations. And let's be really specific about what that is. $750 billion in tax giveaways to giant corporations, including $42 billion to the pharmaceutical industry. Again, not a surprise given that's who bankrolls his campaigns. We need tax policy that prioritizes working families. What Joe Biden and I are talking about doing is cutting taxes for working families, raising them on the wealthy and corporations to make sure that they finally pay their fair share so that we have the money we need to invest in things like healthcare, infrastructure, and education.
John, I'd like to follow up on
if I may respond, if I may, just for briefly. First of all, she's talking about job-crushing tax increases. And for a family of four making $50,000 or less in this country, because of our tax reform, they're paying very little, if any, taxes right now. And I must address one thing. She said it several times now. She's somehow inferring that I may be corrupt because I received donations from various individuals to my campaign. Well, she's doing that, and it's really kind of amazing to me, because she's the only person in this campaign that has got a cloud of criminal suspicion over her head because of taking money illegally from her campaign. and also from several times having false filings with the Federal Election Commission. So I think it's wrong that you say that. You have no reason to say that. And on top of that, I'll tell you, if the Democrats thought that I was at any ethical issues whatsoever, they wouldn't have appointed me one of the prosecutors in the House this year.
Thank you.
I prosecuted one of my
I
own
need to
individuals.
respond to that,
I
Chris.
prosecuted one of my own individuals in the House this year as a designated ethics prosecutor in the House. For you to allege some sort of wrongdoing by me is pretty shameful and pretty desperate.
Dana,
Congressman,
one minute to respond.
I am not calling you corrupt. I am saying that your campaign is funded by interests that are not the same as Central and Western New Yorkers. This is why people want representatives who don't take corporate PAC money. And you could take that same pledge. You could reject that money just like hundreds of other representatives across the country do to give Central and Western New Yorkers the comfort of knowing that you're fighting for their interests, not somebody else. And as to a cloud of criminal suspicion, I have to say that it is really remarkable to me the way that you have been running a slanderous, disgusting campaign in the model of Donald Trump, trying to convince voters that I'm somehow a bad person, instead of addressing the issues in this campaign. You know that if you were to run on your record, if you were to be honest about where you stand and where I stand, if you were to be honest about the kind of person that I am, you would lose this race. So you have resorted to Donald Trump tactics, and it is appalling.
I'm going to fix. I do have to respond.
The question here was about taxes, but we do have a question about advertisements and commercials, so we will jump ahead here, I think. Probably the most frequent question I've gotten from our readers is about the commercials and the ads that have been running in this campaign, particularly the negative ones. Some of them are running by your campaigns, and some are running on your campaign's behalf from Washington PACs. So I'd like to know if you are proud of the ads that you're running and the ones that are running on your behalf.
Listen, first of all, I started my commercial, my campaign this year with a very positive ad detailing my bipartisan record, including that from CNN, which I acknowledge, and many others, Anderson Cooper. And I was met with a barrage of negative commercials right out of the gate by my opponent. You can either fight back or sit there and not take it. I fought back, and I'm identifying issues. She is all in on bail reform. She is all in on increasing taxes. She's all in on raising on Medicare and government-run health care. And as far as her allegation that shaming me because I took money from people who want to donate to my campaign, she has billionaire hedge fund managers who have contributed to her campaign, either directly or through the PACs that she refers to. So this holier-than-thou attitude that she takes, she's somehow pure and immune from all this, is ridiculous. And there's only one person here who continues to put money in their own pocket from these campaigns, for campaign contributions, and that's my opponent. As we speak, every dollar she gets, part of that dollar goes into her own pocket. I had 3 teenage kids. And I could have chose to do that, but I chose not to because I don't think it's right, even if it's legal.
Dana?
Yeah. Candidates are permitted to draw salary from the campaign because we need regular people to be able to run for office. We can't let Congress just be for people who are wealthy enough to take a year off from work. And in fact, it was a Republican member of the Federal Election Commission that advocated for that policy to make sure that you send people to Congress who look like you, who share your experiences, and that's me. For the congressman to somehow try to make that dirty or shameful says a lot about where he stands on who should be representing you and who should have access to the levers of power in government. I have been running a substantive campaign about the issues. Every single campaign commercial that my campaign has run is about the issues. It is about where I stand on the issues, who I am, what I'm fighting for, and where the congressman stands on the issues. He has run a campaign of slanderous, sleazy ads full of misogyny and racism, and he is doing it following Donald Trump's playbook to try to stoke fear in the voters and try to divide us. That is the last thing we need from our representative. A couple of weeks ago, I need one more minute here. A couple of weeks ago, Congressman Katko said in an interview that this election, and he said it again today, is about where we're headed philosophically as a country. I couldn't agree more. And I, for one, do not want to go down the road the congressman is taking, and Central and Western New Yorkers don't want to go there either.
John a minute to respond.
Thank you very much. It's not slanderous to say you're going to raise taxes, because you are. It's not slanderous to say you're for Medicare for all, because you are. It's not slanderous to say you're all in on bail reform, because you are. And it's not slanderous to say you're too far to the left for this district, because you are. The progressive wing of the Democratic Party, which is the far left, the AOCs of the world, have picked out only a few races that they're investing in heavily. And they're investing in this race because they know you can be a far left candidate. It's not slanderous to say those things. Those are facts. You can deflect all you want, but the bottom line is, I don't think that the voters out there are being fooled. You're a tax and spend liberal, and that's what those commercials are showing.
All right, we're going to move on to a couple different topics, and we might have a chance to return to this towards the end. But I'd like to ask a question about climate change, and I believe the next question will start with Dana. We see the effects of climate change all around us. Record wildfires in the west, hurricanes in the south, melting permafrost at the poles. If elected, name one piece of legislation you will support to deal with the climate crisis.
It's hard to pick just one, because there's a whole list of things we need to do to address this crisis. But one of the most important things we have to do is make major investments in renewable energy to end our reliance on fossil fuels, because that's a huge driver of the climate crisis. The good news about this kind of a policy is that it brings tremendous economic opportunity for our region and for the entire country. Renewable energy is the next wave of economic growth. We here in Central and Western New York are poised to be leaders in this field. We have the scientific and the manufacturing expertise to be at the forefront of this new generation of energy policy. And I think that one of the things we need to do to come out of the economic crisis this the spread of COVID has landed us in is make real investments in renewable energy infrastructure.
John?
I agree with her for the most part, no doubt about it. The only thing I'm concerned about is there's a movement afoot in Congress to implement what they call the Green New Deal, which is a very, very calamitous thing to do. And we need to work collaboratively across the aisle, Democrats and Republicans, to find out ways to shift money to renewable research. I've done that. We need to find a way to find a bridge to the time when renewable resources, energy can stand on its own four legs. Right now, nuclear energy is that option, and nuclear energy is something I very much support. We helped save the nuclear industry here in Central New York, in Western New York, and that has saved a lot of the economy in Wayne County and Oswego County, and there's 100% carbon-free emissions. And I'm going to continue to push for that and the next generation of nuclear power, unless and until some time where renewable energies can stand on their own. But make no mistake about it, I agree with my opponent. We need to find more money to go into renewable resources, no doubt.
All right. Thank you both. Next, we'd like to talk
something
about,
we agree on.
There we go. Look at that. I'd like to talk about the Department of Justice. And John, I'll pose this first question to you. You were a prosecutor in the Department of Justice for 20 years. Under President Trump and Attorney General William Barr, the department has interfered in criminal prosecutions of some of the president's friends and launched investigations into his enemies. Roger Stone and Michael Flynn come to mind. As a longtime prosecutor, do you approve of how the Justice Department has handled cases close to the president?
Not always, and I've routinely spoken out when the Department of Justice or the president has overstepped in these areas. I've clearly stated, stepped out against them. But there's also stuff that happens in every administration where you call out the administration on these issues. And what happened during the campaign in 2016 is frightening. Using false or heavily tainted information in a wiretap to wiretap people from an opposing campaign during the course of the campaign, that is frightening stuff. And I know because I've done about 150 wiretaps in my day. I've done all manner of high-level wiretaps against cartel-level drug traffickers, gang members, corrupt cops, corrupt politicians, and I know that there's a very, very high bar when you put information in those wiretaps. That was not met, so that was wrong. But to answer your other question, there's no question in my mind that when the president tries to weigh in on criminal investigations, he should not, and the Attorney General should not, and I've spoken out against him in those regards.
Dana, do you believe the Justice Department needs to be reined in any way by Congress? And if so, what measures should be taken?
Well, one of the fundamental underpinnings of a democratic society is an independent judiciary, and we can't allow the Justice Department to become an errand boy for the president, which is really what this president wants, and what our current Attorney General seems interested in providing for him. So we have to call that out. We have to codify the rules to make sure that it's not left up to the whims of the president or sort of obeying norms, which Donald Trump has shown us repeatedly he's unwilling to obey norms of our democratic society. And I wish that my representative in Congress were more frequent and more forceful in his addressing of these issues, especially given his experience. It is one of the ways that Donald Trump has really worked very hard over these past 4 years to undermine the very foundations of our democracy. It goes beyond irresponsible behavior. It's destructive to our political system and our way of life, and it needs to be addressed as such.
If I may respond briefly, consider this, folks. When the Mueller investigation was undergoing, looking into the president, investigating the president, I was one of the few Republicans who said that investigation should stand, he should let it run its course. So if her to intimate otherwise, it's just wrong.
You also voted against the investigation in Congress.
Please don't interrupt me. I haven't interrupted you. And the second thing is the Durham investigation. If Attorney General Barr and the president were in cahoots and they were all about let's just get the people who did these illegal wiretaps, they would have kept it at the Department of Justice. Durham has a free reign to do an entire investigation, and he's not doing it for political gain. He's a lifelong prosecutor, highly recognized by both parties. And so for her to say that this somehow Attorney General Barr is just a lap boy for the president just doesn't bear up under the facts.
Thank you. Dana, 15 seconds, then we'll move on.
Listen, the voters are watching the same news that we're watching. They know exactly what Attorney General Barr and Donald Trump are doing, and I can't believe the congressman can say that with a straight face.
All right, we're going to change gears a little bit, and I'd like to give each of you a chance to ask a question of your opponent, something we've done in the past here. Before we do that, and while you take a second to think about it, I just want to welcome any viewers who are just joining us. We're here live with John Katko and Dana Balter, who are running for Central New York's 24th Congressional District seat. Dana, we're going to start with you if you have a question for John, and then John, you'll get a chance afterwards.
Sure. Yes, Congressman, I'd like to know if you think Donald Trump is doing a good job handling the coronavirus pandemic.
Not always, no. There's a lot he could do a lot better on. So a lot Governor Cuomo could do a lot better on. He sent people to their death in the nursing homes. But overall, you got to judge everything Governor Cuomo did. You got to judge everything the president did. If you look at what we've been able to do for Central New York, we delivered close to $100 million to 6 hospitals, which are keeping them afloat. We delivered more than $200 million to 8,000 small businesses through the PPP loan that is keeping them afloat. According to Small Business Administration, as many as 200,000 jobs may have been saved, at least temporarily, because of that. And we delivered personal protective equipment and a lot of other things. So by far, he was not perfect. And his rhetoric gets in his way. There's not a president I've seen in the last several decades who puts his foot in his mouth more than the president. But the things we've been able to accomplish, I think, balance it out a little bit. So no, to answer your question, he has not done a great job.
So he hasn't done a great job handling the worst crisis that our country's faced in 100 years, but you think he merits endorsement for re-election
I think some of the worst crises we've endured is the economic crisis. This was definitely a terrible crisis, and there's no question about it. The president's facing crises every day. He had the crisis of inheriting the fact that when he took over office, the Middle East was a cauldron of mess, and that was under Biden's watch. And they were sawing off the heads of Americans on live TV, and they had a caliphate in the Middle East, ISIS. They had terrorists coming into the United States committing terrorist acts. He did a great job of that. He did not do a good job of this. This was a terrible once-in-a-lifetime pandemic. He didn't do as good a job as he could because of his rhetoric. But the bottom line is, it wasn't terrible either because we got a lot of money to the front lines, and we're working very hard to try and do better.
John, a chance to ask a question of Dana.
Sure. Last year when you got caught taking money from your campaign illegally, one of the things you attempted to justify with that was the fact that you needed the money because you didn't have enough money to run without it. You inferred that you needed the money. But then you were able to pay back the money you took from the campaign illegally right away. So the question is, if you had the ability to pay back the money right away, why did you need to take the salary in the first place?
Congressman, I did not illegally accept money from my campaign. As I said before, candidates are allowed to accept a salary. And the reason that they are is so that everyday people who can't afford to take a year off from work are able to run for office. As I have said from the very beginning, I made a mistake in accepting that money too early. I was unaware of the restriction on the date. As soon as I was made aware of that mistake, I did everything I needed to do to correct it. I paid the money back. And the idea that there's something nefarious there is just wrong. And you have continually tried to make voters think that this is somehow an evil and underhanded thing. It's not. This rule was put in place by a bipartisan election commission to make sure that everyday folks can run for office. It's very simple. And in fact, when the newspapers here reported on this at the first time, the Republican member of the commission who fought for that rule talked to the press about why it is so important.
Thank you.
We can't, hold on, I'm not quite,
Not done? Okay.
not quite finished. We can't expect our elected representatives not to make mistakes. What we should expect from them is that they handle their mistakes with honesty and integrity, which is exactly what I've done.
Follow up?
Yeah, first of all, she didn't answer the question. I asked her how was did she really need to take the money. Second of all, she tries to blend the lines between taking money from her campaign.
Is this a question?
Which very few people do, and I didn't get into a question, and taking what very few people do, and the fact that she committed a crime. I want to ask her this. First of all, are you saying that what you did by taking money when you weren't supposed to from your campaign as salary is not a crime? Because it is. And by the way, when you characterize a mistake is when I go to Cafe Cabal and I forget to get non-fat milk for my wife's coffee. When you take money illegally from your campaign, that's a crime. And that's a fact, because I know it because I'm a prosecutor and I'm on the ethics committee. It's a crime.
Congressman, I have put up with a lot from you in this campaign. You are running, as I said before, a Trump-style campaign full of lies and fears and smears. And it is not only disrespectful to the voters, it's disrespectful to the democratic process. The voters can see through what you're doing. I have heard from thousands of them about how disgusted they are with the campaign that you're running. And what they are really looking for is someone who is going to be willing to talk to them about the challenges that we face as a community, how to get the COVID pandemic under control, how to make sure everybody has health care, how to make sure that there's real economic opportunity for people coming out of this crisis. That's what they want to hear from the people running to represent them in office. The smears and the lies and the twisting of things to generate fear and division is, I understand, something that you have learned from your party's leader, but it's not what Central and Western New Yorkers are interested in, and they deserve better.
All right, we're going to move on from here because we really don't have
Okay.
much time left, and I
Sure.
want to get to a couple of things. I do want to return to one topic from the beginning because I think we might have had some technical issues, so I just want to return to the topic of healthcare and hear from each of you again briefly, just 1 minute each on your positions on healthcare. Starting with Dana, and again, I know we've been over this, but we're just going to kind of retread it here.
Okay.
You're an advocate of a partial adoption of Medicare for all, and I'd like to know how exactly you plan to pay for that Medicare program.
So what I support is giving everybody access to Medicare, which is one of our most popular government programs and the most efficient health insurance system in the world. I want to get us there in stages by lowering the age of eligibility of Medicare, by offering a public buy-in so people of any age who want to participate in Medicare can. Both of those are steps that Joe Biden supports, and I'm eager to work with him on those. I want to extend Medicare to babies when they're born so that from day one of life you have coverage. And what this plan does is lower the cost of health care for 95% of households. It will save us as a country about $2 trillion on our healthcare costs. But more importantly, for 95% of households, it will lower costs. The only people who will pay more are the top 5%, which, again, I am okay with.
She has had unbelievable opportunities today to be straight with us. They asked her again just now how she's going to pay for it, and she said she's going to save you money. She just can't bring herself to say what she's already said on tape. She's going to raise our taxes, and then you're going to save money in the process. I think that sucks for people that are of retirement age, who have paid their whole lives into the Medicare system, who have worked hard their whole lives, and then to see that coverage get diminished or somehow really probably altered terribly, because they're going to have to pay taxes on top of their own taxes they paid to pay for people who never paid taxes who are automatically going to get covered. That's just not going to work. And you can't do it without raising taxes in a dramatic fashion. If you went to Medicare for all overnight, it would cost this country close to $40 trillion over 10 years. It would double the size of our budget, which means it double the taxation. She is not being straight with you. Just say it. Just say you got to raise taxes to start this program. Just say it.
There's another lie the congressman has been telling in that answer, this notion that somehow expanding Medicare and giving everybody access is going to hurt Medicare for people who already receive it. That's absurd. We're not talking about reducing Medicare benefits. We're talking about giving them to more people. And in fact, the plan includes expanded benefits for seniors because we need to make sure that they have dental and vision and hearing aids and long-term care covered. So again, it's a scare tactic. It's designed to confuse you, and it's designed to distract from the real solutions to the challenges that we face.
It's a very simple question. How do you pay for all that? So now you're telling me
we're already paying for it.
Not only are you going to put more people on, you're going to expand the coverage. So these poor seniors who have whole lives who have paid into the system are living on fixed incomes. They are going to have to pay more taxes to pay for it. There's no other way to get around it. And it's amazing to me you've had so many opportunities today to acknowledge that fact, and you won't do it. That's amazing. That should scare the hell out of you.
It's not going to cost more. It's going to cost less. And we're talking about cutting taxes on people who make less than $400,000 a year, not raising them.
We're going to move on from this now because we have just a few minutes left. So I'm going to ask a final question, and you'll each have 30 seconds to respond to this final question. Dana, we'll start with you. This has been a heated campaign. There's been a lot of negative advertising, and a lot of people are frustrated by that. What's something you admire about your opponent?
I have said this many times. Congressman Katko, before serving in Congress, served us as a prosecutor for 20 years. He has a 25, almost I think 26-year career in public service, and I think that is a noble thing to dedicate your life to, and I'm grateful for those years of service.
Thank you. I admire you for your tenacity.
All right. Well, with that, we're going to offer you each a chance to give a closing statement to voters. You'll have 2 minutes to make your closing statement. We had a coin toss again at the beginning, and John will be giving the first closing here.
I want to thank the Syracuse papers for having this debate today. I want to thank my opponent for a spirited debate as always. And I just want to throw out to you a couple of things, remind you of my background. I was a federal organized crime prosecutor. I was sent to the front lines in El Paso, Texas to go after drug cartel members, at great risk to myself and my family. I was sent to Puerto Rico to do the same thing, and I prosecuted the first death penalty eligible case in Puerto Rico. I came back to Central New York, and I started and ran the gang task force, which had a dramatically positive impact on crime in the city of Syracuse. I was even appointed a special prosecutor in the country of Albania when government troops killed a bunch of people, and they selected one prosecutor from the entire world to go over and do that, and that was me. And then, again, a great personal risk. My wife and I, many times, have endured serious threats. We had to move our family out of our house, but we always stayed the course because you know what public service is about. And for my wife and I and our kids, it's a team effort. And I have led during the course of this pandemic. I've delivered locally again and again to my community, and I am very proud of the bipartisan record that I have in Congress. In fact, I have the second most bipartisan member of anyone in all of Congress, bipartisan rating rather, which means on a regular basis, I side with my opponent, my Democratic colleagues, more than almost anybody, and they side with me more than almost anybody in Congress. That's a remarkable record, and I'm very proud of that because that's what this district wants. You want a centrist and a moderate, and I would respectfully submit, and I respect my opponent for her tenacity, but she is a far left person, and she just doesn't fit this district. And I also would submit to you that based on my experience and my resume, I am a better person to lead us out of this pandemic. I've already shown that I work across the aisle on a regular basis. I'll continue to do so. And our Problem Solvers Caucus proposal for the COVID relief package is something my opponent denigrated. It should be the blueprint. And Anthony Brindisi thinks so. I think so, and so would all the other moderate members on both sides of the aisle. So thank you very much, and I hope to have your vote on November 3rd. God bless.
Thank you, John. Dana, 2 minutes.
The stakes of this election couldn't be higher. We're facing the worst health crisis in 100 years, the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression, a climate crisis that literally has our country on fire, and a racial justice crisis that we are generations past due in addressing. And at the top, we have a president who's making it all worse. He has refused to get the spread of the virus under control and regularly flouts public health guidelines. He stokes hatred and fear. He makes us less safe with every passing week. Donald Trump is the most dangerous and corrupt president of our lifetimes, and John Katko endorses him. And now John Katko is running a Trump-style campaign full of lies and fear. We get enough of that from our president. We don't need it from our congressmen, too. Congressman Katko has repeatedly sold us out for corporate PAC checks. He's taken hundreds of thousands of dollars from big oil, from insurance, from big pharma and big banks. And in exchange, he voted for $750 billion in tax giveaways to corporations, adding $2 trillion to our debt and putting Social Security and Medicare on the chopping block. We deserve better. You deserve someone who will fight for you. And you can count on me to fight for you because my story is your story. I know what it's like to live paycheck to paycheck. I know what it's like to not find insurance because of a pre-existing condition. I know what it's like to watch the medical debt pile up and have no idea how you're going to get out from under it. I want to go to Congress because no one should have to face challenges like this. In Congress, I will serve as a check on unbridled power and corruption. I will always put Central and Western New Yorkers first. I hope to earn your support and your vote because together we can bring America back.
Well, that's going to do it for our congressional debate. John, Dana, thank you both for joining us today.
Thank you.
Please keep up with syracuse.com throughout this election season for continuing coverage of all local races. If you missed any portion of the debate, it will be available to view in its entirety on syracuse.com and on the syracuse.com Facebook page later today. Election Day is Tuesday, November 3rd. Anyone can request a mail-in ballot up until Tuesday, October 27th. And early voting in New York will be open starting this Saturday, October 24th, until Sunday, November 1st. Visit the Onondaga County Board of Elections website at ongov.net/elections for more information on how and where you can vote. Please make sure to exercise your right this fall and vote in the upcoming election. Thank you all for watching.